So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are at this European Roundtable during the European SDG Summit. My name is Cefic. I'm the Executive Director of CSR Europe, and thank you for joining this Roundtable. And then, if I may take you to the next slide. Today we have a session on, and it's close to the topic where we started the summit with, and what is the core topic of the summit. It's a session about sustainability roadmaps and what industry federations do on sustainability. And you might see that we have, and maybe the print is small, but we will come back to that later, a wide array of speakers from different industry federations coming and share with you and with each other as well on how they deal with that topic of bringing sustainability through industry federations. From a technical side, during this webinar, everyone is muted as standard to minimize audio noise. But if you have a technical problem on our platform, then please refresh or log in again, and then you will be able to follow again. If you have any questions, or if there are engagements you want to do with the speakers, please use the chat function on the right-hand side of your of the screen. If you have a technical problem that you cannot solve, please write a mail to Marco, mm@csreurope.org, so he will be standby and try to help you as soon as possible. Do not forget to engage, because we don't know how many people join in each of our sessions, so the chat function is the main interaction, and later on, after the session, you can also go in the lobby or in the chat rooms to have further discussions on one-to-one basis or in a more public way. So let me start on this topic of the topic that we launched this morning with the European Pact for Sustainable Industry, and what Ilham Kadri said from Solvay. With CSR Europe, our ambition is very clear, and we want to move from a volume to a shared value economy. And we believe that, or the campaign that we are starting now, is basically a very ambitious campaign. It says we would like to have all European industry sector federations to roll out an integrated sustainability strategy by 2024. That is almost tomorrow. Also, towards the Commission, this campaign endeavors for integration of all the SDGs in all EU policies, so making the linkages between the different policy areas within the Commission. And to companies, we want to incentivize and further promote, also through the industry federations, more collaborative sector or cross-sectorial solutions to be found. So if we want to break through on the agenda on the sustainability and work towards a sustainable future for Europe and make this Green Deal practically work, the role of industry federations cannot be overestimated. It's important to reach scale. It's important also to share the learning, to share the experience, and to have more collaboration. That's all the purpose of what we mentioned this morning. And you see that on the next slide, that this pact is actually a support from business to the ambitions of Next Generation EU and the European Green Deal of the European Commission. And we are trying to take it also seriously in the way that we will, and Moody's announced this morning, Moody's and Vigil Eriks announced this morning that they will work together with us on a sustainable industry barometer on an annual basis, that we can track progress on how our industry federations embracing and advancing the sustainability agenda in their sector and with other sectors. And it's not something totally new. It's not something that needs to start. If we only look at what we ourselves did in CSR Europe, we have a number of companies that are already engaged in a number of leadership platforms, so they understood very well that they cannot do by themselves. For example, I think it was given this morning as well, drive sustainability in the automotive sector, where automotive companies work together on supply chain sustainability. There's also work in the trucking sector with a number of shippers and carriers that we launched, and that is still open for other participants, where companies like IKEA, Daimler, etc., and others work together on desk, working together on how can we make the social situation of truck drivers in Europe better to collaborating with each other on this. And you see a number of other examples there on the slide of other collaborative platforms that CSR Europe is running. And also sometimes we worked in the past with a number of industry federations, like in the tire and rubber manufacturers or Wind Europe, etc., to help them or to work together on some projects also, to enhance sustainability. But that is only in CSR Europe. And actually the purpose of the campaign and of the work in the Pact for Sustainable Industry is wider. And when we look at industry federations in Europe, and we did a research, I think now 1 year and a half ago, we saw there is a lot of variety. Some industry federations are very much advanced, are leading, are early movers on embracing sustainability and bringing sustainability inside their own federations and making that part of their vision, but also making that part of the work they do towards the Commission or the work they do to their associations and their company members in a very practical way. While some other industry federations did not get there and can move further up. And today, and it's really a pleasure to have as many of them here with us, we have this example of what I called in the title of the slide, early movers. So I call industry federations who started early on, already working on the sustainability agenda, working with their companies and with their associations. And today we would like to ask them, why did they do that? What was the reason of starting to do that? What are the challenges in working on sustainability through an industry federations? What is it that they want to achieve? So you see, we have a wide array of speakers for you ready, and we will have basically a big panel discussion. The Aluminium sector, the Responsible Jewellery Council, Eurogas, Animal Nutrition, FEFAC, the compound feed manufacturers, international flavors and fragrances, but also the work they do on their sustainability charter, and then Cefic from the chemical sector. So normally, and I must start with an apology, we had asked DG Grow to join us in this discussion because, of course, in DG Grow of the European Commission, the sustainability agenda is, and towards sectors, is also developed, and Mr. Kosigu had agreed to speak with us today to outline what the Commission, what the direction is specifically of DG Grow in this area. But like 2 hours ago or something, he suddenly had to cancel his presence, so I'm afraid you will have to miss the presentation of the Commission, but which gives us a little bit more time for our speakers that you will see again on the next slide to come and talk to us about what they are doing in their sustainability, in their industry federation. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Sandro Starita from European Aluminium, a sector that also started, as I said, a long time ago on the sustainability journey. And we would like to hear from Sandro, what did you do, how did you do, why did you do it? Sandro, I give the floor to you.
So thanks a lot, Stefan. I hope you can hear me well, and good afternoon to everyone. So I don't know how much you are familiar with the aluminium industry. So by thanking the CSR Europe for this invitation, I would like to start with introducing a bit European Aluminium. We represent the aluminium industry in Europe. Aluminium is a global commodity. We cover basically the entire value chain in Europe in terms of membership, and of course there are close interaction with other regions in Europe, outside of Europe. So European Aluminium started many years ago, so well before my time, to report a number of sustainable development indicators. This started already 20 years ago, roughly, and the first data refers to more than 20 years ago. So this means that there was already over time an established trust between the membership and the secretariat, but also an awareness of the importance of monitoring a wide range of aspects related to sustainability. So this was covering the various steps of the production and transformation of aluminium in environmental area and social area, in economic area as well. So this was done for a number of years in a way of looking behind, so looking the rear view mirror through lagging indicators. And at some point, we started seeing an increasing pressure from the outside world in terms of policies. They were the first low carbon roadmap for the European Commission. And then we started to see a lot of interest also from the market in terms of sustainable products. And this was easily reflected and quickly reflected up in the value chain. And so we saw that many members were reporting to us that there was a lot of request for more credentials in terms of what do you want to do in the future, further than just reporting what happened in the past without any, let's say, agreed direction for this. And so we started debating this, and we started developing a vision for the future and saying, if we want to be the material for a sustainable future, then of course we need to look back and see a number of actions need to be put in place. And so with this, we launched in 2015 the sustainability roadmap for the aluminum industry in Europe towards 2025. So this is the document that is in a slide that you can see on the left-hand side. That's the cover. It's freely available on our website, of course, and I believe that it's also linked by the slide. But if not, if you go on our website, you can easily find it. And this is, I mean, it has as a title, Common Goals, Shared Action, because that's the philosophy that we have behind. And this was a way to put together the entire membership. European Aluminium has roughly 80 members throughout the value chain, so very different companies in terms of geographic scope, in terms of value chain scope, in terms of strategies as well. So this was an interesting journey in terms of debating with them. And we articulated the entire roadmap across three main areas. So one is the production and transformation, one is the product delivered, and so the end of life management as well, and stewardship throughout the value chain, and the social dimension. And I will come back a bit later about this point. So in the end, this was launched in 2015 with the objectives to 2025. And at the moment, as you can imagine, doing some math, we are exactly in the middle of it. And so we are also starting to do a midterm review to see where we are and to see if we are going in the right direction. In the meantime, the entire world changed a bit at European level and at global level. When we launched the roadmap, there was no SDGs yet. They were just launched a few months later, or in the same period. So we also saw over time a stronger pressure and stronger developments also at European level. Now we have the Green Deal. We have a lot of initiatives that need to be also factored in our exercise that started from inside out. And if you go to the next slide, please. So this is just to show that we had, as I said before, an history of reporting, and then we developed the roadmap across the three main areas that I mentioned. And for each of them, we set targets. For example, in the production and transformation, we looked at waste management, we looked at the water management, we looked at the energy consumption, and so on. So okay, I see that apparently the voice now is good. Okay. And this started a series of parallel work streams within the membership, because as you can imagine, we have a number of expert groups within the membership. And so each one of them was assigned a task to deal with the topic of their expertise, with then the idea to bring it back to the broader membership for approval and endorsement, because of course this cannot be imposed by the top. If a broader part of the membership is not subscribing, so some targets, then you cannot really impose it to them. It has to be felt as something that is encompassing also the company strategy and the specific interest that the companies have. One important thing is that aluminium is a commodity, as you know. It means that the properties of the use phase will basically be the same wherever is produced and however is produced. So the older dimension related to the production and transformation is extremely important, also to valorize the specificities and the advantages that you have in Europe, because in Europe you have extremely ambitious legislation. So if you want to operate in Europe, you already have to have a certain level that's maybe is not required in other regions. We wanted to valorize this as well. And it's a pity that the Commission is not there, but Mr. Kosigu knows us very well. So this is also something that needs to be to go in parallel with the legislative developments, sometimes it's also a matter of balancing the perspective of the legislative policies and what is actually achievable from an ambitious industrial perspective at sectoral level, not at company level only. So I would say that, you know, in terms of complexity, the fact that we have a complex value chain and membership makes it a bit more difficult to put together all the perspectives, but at the same time gives a better, you know, a view of the entire value chain and pros and cons and trade-offs that you have across the value chain. And also, as you can imagine, some of the areas are not in full control of the aluminium industry. So if you want to reduce the carbon footprint of the electricity, you cannot do it yourself. You need to go to the energy producers and discuss with them and see how can we cooperate on this. And so also on the social dimension, European aluminium industry is not one of the major employers in Europe. So of course we can change and improve whatever is in our scope. But in order to participate to a broader let's say initiative at global level, we need to partner with others. And this is also an important point, to have partnerships. And I would say that another important aspect is that you discuss with the membership, you can imagine, I guess, that the other colleagues will say something similar, have a lot of internal debate within the membership in order to arrive to a conclusion. But then maybe you go outside and the world is not understanding what you mean. So it's saying, okay, you spent months and months discussing internally, but this is not meaningful to the external world. So one thing that we did was also to organize a sustainability advisory board with the high-level stakeholders, external stakeholders, to get a kind of reality check, and also sometimes being constructively criticized and say, okay, we think that this is not so important for us, and so you need to think in a different way. So we brought back to the membership in order to continue this type of feedback and exchange. So in terms of you know, what type of effects were given by this roadmap in the membership, I would say that there's a lot of healthy competition in terms of looking at the other, because when you post internally a graph where you have all the performance from the best to the worst, everyone wants to know where they sit in that curve. And so even if you don't know who's the best in class, you know that it's not you. And so you know that this can be also challenged by the customers, by the market, and this is something that's that we found quite positive in the last few years. And then in the meantime, other initiatives took place that are further pushing this from the pressure from the market. And if we go to the last slide, and then I can conclude this part, and I'm happy to continue with the rest of the debate. We are trying to put this roadmap, which would be the first part on the left-hand side, together with the other elements that we have defined on the sustainability, let's say, planning for the European aluminium sector towards 2050. So we have a Vision 2050 that was published a couple of years ago, 1.5 years ago. And then we also have a Circular Aluminium Action Plan, which is focused on the circularity and the recycling aspects of European aluminium industry. And also we focused on the SDG implementation. By the way, we also did an exercise together with CSR Europe. So the point is to look beyond just the short term, and also legislative developments in the shorter term, in order to have a kind of narrative towards the future ambitions, and then backtrack and define what you need to do in the meantime, if you want to be there at that point. So the world is changing fast, and we are in the middle of a crisis that can also be the opportunity for a sustainable recovery. At the same time, it is very challenging for the members at the moment for the operation. So we also need to balance this with the perspective for a sustainable recovery, but also to make it workable in the shorter term for the members. And with this, I would conclude my intervention, but happy to take any questions later on and to debate with the panel.
Thank you very much for that, Sandro. I had a question on that slide here in the yellow on the left-hand side. You talk about collaborative projects, and you also said in the beginning it's about common goals and shared action. Could you give an example of a very practical shared action that you performed with the association or with some companies of the association?
Well, some things that we are doing, for example, we are cooperating a lot on safety in the workplace, which is something that many sectoral associations don't cover. But we have developed a lot of informative material internally, of course, anonymous, whatever companies prefer it to be anonymous, or openly shared, whatever companies want to. And at the moment, we are developing an exchange platform online where companies can upload material or can be uploaded through the secretariat if they prefer it to be anonymous, where they can report accidents that happen in the workplace. You can imagine, I mean, big facilities, big machineries, and a lot of equipment moving. And so this is something that we find extremely useful, because it's going beyond the competition. There, if everyone becomes great at safety in the workplace, then you don't have a competitive issue. Everyone will benefit. So this is one of the examples of something that normally is not in the first radar. That's, I mean, in the first place in the radar of activities.
No, thank you. That's very practical. And sorry, one more question. Sustainability Advisory Board. So, is that on a regular way that you ask it? Is that a fixed board that meets every X months? Or?
So we had an experience which was just concluded a few months ago of 2 years. So for 2 years, we had the same 5 people from all over Europe, some based in Brussels, some based outside. And with them, we also went to plant visits. And so to show the sector, because they were experts of sustainability, but not necessarily of the sector. So they got to meet also some of the CEOs of the companies to see the reality of the plants. And they had the chance to ask questions directly at the plant based on what they saw. And so for the as I said, we are in the middle of the midterm review. We will see if to continue something along this line, or to have more, let's say, different type of exchanges. In it can be with different types of stakeholders instead of having always the same. But I think it was extremely useful exercise.
Thank you for that. And I would like, maybe if you allow, I didn't see any specific questions for you coming up, but maybe they will follow, and then we will come back to you. And I would like now to go to Iris van der Veke. Iris, thank you for being with us. And we go to a different sector, the jewelry sector, a very high profile, also consumer-facing sector. And I believe also that the Responsible Jewelry Council was founded already, if I'm well, back in 2005. So could you tell us maybe and share with us how it evolved and what the current direction is? Iris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan. And first of all, let me take a moment to thank CSR Europe and the European Commission for the opportunity for the Responsible Jewelry Council to participate in this roundtable. We've touched upon the fact the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, it's about leaving no one behind. And we as RJC also believe very much that this is a collective responsibility, and we're very much committed to this agenda. So allow me indeed to go back to 2005 when we were founded. So 15 years ago, 14 pioneer leaders in the industry, from mining to retail, came around the table to set up an organization to establish a standard for the industry. And some of the founding members are Cartier, Tiffany, the Beers Group, Rio Tinto, Signet, ABN AMRO, and Cipjo. And today, so 15 years later, we have almost 1,300 members globally and representing the full supply chain. Now, from the start, the mandate of the organization had a vision, and the vision was a responsible worldwide supply chain that promotes trust in the global jewelry and watch industry. And trust is, of course, based on responsible business practices and transparency proof points. So hundreds of experts in and outside the industry built a standard, which is called the Code of Practices. And it was clearly understood from the start that, first of all, the standard needed to be inclusive. So my previous colleague talked about it. It needed to be fit for purpose in an evolving regulatory landscape. Second, the standard needed to take into consideration an integrated approach to supply chain management so that it can apply on different aspects of the supply chain, from mining to refining to cutting and polishing to manufacturing and retail. And finally, the standard, of course, needed to be robust. In other words, capture different aspects of sustainability, so including responsible mining, human rights, labor practices, health and safety, product integrity and disclosure, environment, etc. And so today we have two standards, which is one is called the Code of Practices. It's really the core of the leading management practices in sustainability. And then we also have the Chain of Custody standard focused on provenance of materials. Now, an RGC member commits to becoming audited and certified under the Code of Practices within 2 years of joining. And the audit is conducted by an independent accredited auditor. And what we see is that companies joining the responsible jewelry councils really are starting a journey. And it's about step-by-step actions to understand their risks in their operations and their supply chains, to integrate responsible business practices really at the core of their operations, so into their management systems, and of course, understand better their impact and to see how they can actually move beyond compliance, so from doing no harm to doing good. And we very much see this as a process of continuous improvement and also an enormous window of opportunity to develop, to contribute to the bigger agenda of the world, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. Now, this slide demonstrates how we have evolved over the past 15 years. Today, our materials include diamonds, gold, silver, and colored gemstones. And we see that through the Code of Practices implementations, indeed, our members are moving towards this path of continuous improvement towards 2030. And let's talk a bit about the challenges and the opportunities. And first of all, I'd like to share with all of you that it takes time to build a community of confidence, and it is an ongoing process of continuous improvement. And in that process, education and collaboration are key. And I think it's important to always stay humble. It takes time if you really want to, first of all, develop a robust standard that's inclusive and applicable for the whole supply chain, depending where you're positioned, and then it's really about implementation. So the multi-stakeholder perspective is critical. NGOs, academic world, industry, non-industry. The development of the first Code of Practices took 4 years. And last year, we launched the 3rd revision of the code, aligned with the OECD due diligence and the UN guiding principles of business and human rights. So again, it is so important to be fit for purpose in this evolving regulatory landscape. Another, I would say, challenge, but also opportunity is that you need leadership at the top, and that is mission critical to build transformative partnerships and to drive positive impact. You need buy-in from leading industry players, and at the same time, you need to inspire small enterprises to become involved. And this is exactly what happened over time. We had a lot of larger groups that took the standard as their core management system to their suppliers. So you have this cascade effect. I just give examples like Signet, Rio Tinto, the Beers Group are some of the examples who really pushed that agenda. And today, we have over 60% small enterprises and members in 71 countries. So, and this is important, this element of inclusiveness. We also saw the importance of connectivity, the trade associations around the world. For example, BJOP in France or GIT in Thailand, and so many of organizations that are interconnected to be able to educate and indeed also go to their network to talk about the code. And recently, for example, we have a partnership with the Plum Club in the USA. That's a coalition of leading and important suppliers spanning all facets of the jewelry sector. And they're asking their members to become RGC certified. And we see that as also, again, a good model to engage and educate. So yes, we have been very much also working on education, especially on the SDG agenda and an SDG roadshow to bring along our members to understand about materiality and how they can use this code to really deliver to the more aspirational, bigger agenda of the world. And we also have put a lot of emphasis on advocacy. And in times of heightened risks in global mineral supply chains, we support the NGO call for action and really ask companies not to step away from due diligence and really embrace the OECD initiatives, because this remains more important than ever. Another learning curve that we've seen is that we need to learn from inside the industry, but also outside the industry. And that's why we're so happy to be participating at this discussion today. But we work very closely with organizations within the industry, if it's the LBMA or the World Gold Council or RMI or the World Diamond Council, because we believe together, only together, we will have more impact. And that's also the reason why very early in our journey that the RJC became member of ISEAL, which is the global organization for credible sustainability standards. Again, because we wanted our work that they would also, have an eye on what we do and see how we can always do better. And then finally, I think my final learning curve is that at the end, it's all about trust about stakeholder. And Stefan, you touched about it. We are working in an industry of beauty and emotions, and trust is at the essence of the consumer when they walk into a store or a boutique. And what we see is that there is this more conscious consumer, that's millennial and Gen Z generation are looking for purpose, so that indeed this is here to stay. So we are confident that our community will only grow. And then one last point, as I would say almost a call of action, is data. I think that everyone as trade organizations or networks are looking, how can we understand the data of our members? How can we show that we progress on environmental, social, and governance frameworks? And how can we see that we really build capacity? And next slide, please. When we look at the next slide, I just want to show that at the essence is our code of practices, and that the RJC is part of the movement towards 2030. Today, we have 1,280 companies, and we know that we have a direct impact on over 320,000 people. But we need to continue the movement and focus much more on understanding better impact and helping our members to report on progress. Recently, we've launched an SDG task force, and we want to show companies how they can make progress. And the members of the SDG task force will commit to voluntary reporting and how they're progressing on the implementation of the SDGs. And more information will be shared very soon on that. But I thought this slide is quite interesting because it shows indeed the different sections of our code of practices. And when you look more at the guidance, and everything is available on our website, you can see how a company can integrate this code and contribute to the 2030 agenda. And next slide, please. So 2030 is almost upon us, and we know from all the reports that the SDG targets are falling behind. So as we this year celebrate our 15th anniversary in quite exceptional circumstances, I do believe that there's huge potential to have greater impact, work even better together, and I think it's something that we owe future generations. And the Sustainable Development Goals are pivotal to this journey. Thank you, Stefan.
No, thank you, Iris, very much. And you mentioned something important, and that also Sandra mentioned earlier, the importance of showing data. And data to show, well, to use data as a sector or as an initiative to show progress. Is that always easy to agree with such a wide group of companies on what are the data we want to show? What is the purpose with it? Could you share a little bit more about that?
Well, I think that's the biggest challenge, and at the same time the biggest window for opportunities. And the Responsible Jury Council is currently reshaping its theory of change. So really looking at how we, collectively as an industry, and how members individually can show progress. So what we're doing, Stefan, is we're not reinventing the wheel. We have mapped out, all the numerous frameworks that are available. But what we're now trying to do, and I'm just saying, and the team is working very hard and diligently on that, is building a model that companies can use, but from early starters to leaders. So, because I don't think we cannot, it's very important, the element of inclusiveness. We need to get people on board. So, yeah, we'll definitely be, I think, sending this in a consultation round, in a couple of weeks. So it will be open for public consultation. But yeah, I agree. Challenging, but it's a must. It's absolutely a must.
No, thank you very much. It's indeed not easy sometimes always to get that alignment. I would like to move on, also being aware of the time. James Watson as Secretary General of Eurogas. So it's a different sector, but the sector that is at the heart of the Green Deal and climate neutrality debate. James, you are the Secretary General of the Industry Association, covering both the wholesale, retail, distribution. So it's covering what I read on your website, 51 companies and 24 associations. How does sustainability feature in your organization? Could you explain that to us a little bit? The floor is yours, James.
Thank you, Stefan. And it's a great pleasure to be with you here today. So thanks very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be able to present the view and vision of the European gas industry. As you rightly point out, we are an association that covers most of the mid and downstream elements of the gas sector in Europe. And therefore, we're very much focused on delivering gas and fuel to consumers. So very close to the consumer, as well as the distribution system and the retail market. So yes, Eurogas is an association encompassing European Union-based companies as well, I must say that. And of course, we have for a long time represented natural gas. Natural gas has been part of the economies of most European countries quite extensively over the last maybe more than 100 years. Eurogas itself is 30 years old, so we have been around for a while. And indeed, we have seen, I think, indeed, as we mentioned by Sandro, these are changing times. We have seen the changing times, not least in our own sector, where there's a strong pressure to move energy in line with SDG 7 to provide clean and affordable energy to people. And this therefore means that we have undertaken our own assessment of what the role of gas can be in achieving things like the SDGs, but also delivering climate neutrality, whereby greenhouse gas emissions are reduced up to 2050, which is also an objective of the European Commission. We are, of course, an association. That means we have many different views within our association. It's not always easy for people to embrace change. Yet, nevertheless, our association has felt that it is necessary to embrace the change that is existing, and basically from Greta Thunberg through to Extinction Rebellion and others, we see the pressure to deliver more clean and affordable energy from the people, from indeed the policymakers and from the NGOs. And this is something that we feel is something that an industry association such as ours should look to how we can actually deliver on that promise of clean and affordable energy. So we decided that we would undertake a vision, a pathway to 2050. How could our industry, so representing the sector, how can our industry contribute to achieving those goals? And so with the help of the consultancy DNVGL, we were able to set out upon developing a vision that would deliver a sustainable future for the people of Europe and the people of the world. And basically the objective of that study was to show the role that gas could play in achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. And what we were able to demonstrate is that indeed there is a necessity to move from our traditional business model and to embrace new opportunities that are coming through in the form of other renewable and decarbonized gases, such as hydrogen, which I'm sure many of you will have heard of. There has been certain hydrogen hype in Brussels at the moment, and indeed biomethane. And so what we were able to see is that there is a future for gaseous molecules as long as we embrace the new technologies that are coming in, which lower the carbon footprint and the greenhouse gas emissions of our fuel. So it's a fundamental change, if you like, for an association such as ours. We've set out on our original bearings being the main promoters of natural gas. And over the last few years, we have indeed developed a direction which is very much in line with achieving sustainability. What we do believe is important is that we have to be able to deliver that clean energy as affordably as possible. It's not just clean, it's also affordable. And one of the elements that we felt was worthy of mentioning here is indeed that the pathway that DNVGL delivered ultimately got us to that objective in a reduced cost way than if we relied purely on one mechanism or one vector to achieve that objective. Therefore, having a balanced approach enabled us to build greater support for the views that we've been able to put forward. Indeed, the board has adopted that vision, and indeed we now do support carbon neutrality in 2050, and we do support the development of hydrogen and biomethane as viable alternatives to deliver affordable and clean energy to the European industry and to the European customer. You could go to the next slide, please. We certainly don't operate in a vacuum, we certainly don't operate on our own. And in developing that vision, we worked very closely with civil society, NGOs, industry, policymakers, even the media. We spoke to a lot of different people. We held a number of stakeholder roundtables as we were looking at our, if you like, this is where we began and this is where we're going to story, and discussed with them on several occasions, we had stakeholder roundtables to assess what was coming forward from the studies that we were doing, and also whether or not the direction was the correct one to be going. And I think that's really important for all associations or companies. However, you must engage with stakeholders, the people that you do your business with, and also the people who are indeed looking at the performances of your sectors and considering what efforts you're making to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So I must say that no pathway can be delivered by one sector on its own. There must be engagement. And we found that very, very enriching because we, of course, found lots of challenging views, differing views, but in the end found ways to work with those stakeholders to produce an output that we could all be proud of. Indeed, it's also gone on to form, how should we say, specific policy ideas that we have about how we should go about decarbonising European gas consumption. This graph here on this slide shows the volumes of gases that we would see being developed from the sources that I mentioned, hydrogen and biomethane. And as you can see, up to 2050, there's this considerable increase from where we are today, which is a natural gas world. And one of the tools that we think we should do to achieve that is to have binding targets, to develop targets for the amount of penetration, the phase in, if you like, of these new clean and affordable fuels. One of the reasons that I wanted to mention this in this slide is because it's not just our own idea. We found that we were able to work with other associations and other sectors who could also sign up to these ideas. And I think that's possible because of the efforts that we've made in engaging with people, in engaging with stakeholders and listening to what they have to say. So there are a broad range of people who can get behind this vision of the association to deliver that sustainability objective and deliver that sustainability pathway. And I think that from our point of view, that's one of the main messages that I would offer to you today, that we really do see you basically learn when you talk to people. Your view isn't always the most perfect one, and hearing different opinions really helps you focus the direction where you need to go. It can be challenging, and it's not always easy to bring everybody with you. Nevertheless, in the end, the board fully supported these positions and fully supported the vision that we have, which through unanimity. And we're talking about very many big companies with very large exposures to natural gas, and yet nevertheless, they were willing to go along with this because there was a lot of stakeholder engagement and involvement, and people had good discussions and understood that this was a good way to achieve that objective. One final point, because there's also a point about the local benefits. If I go to the next slide, please. If there is another slide, there should be, yes. There's one important element about this, and it's about local involvement. And one of the things that we did find is that by developing that new technology that we will need, most of the technology that we have will be European based. And that's quite important because what we're able to do is work with the unions. So the trade unions could come on board and say, yes, we understand this vision, we understand where you're going, and we understand that there will be a jobs and wealth creation because the technologies around hydrogen and biomethane are today basically European technologies. So developing those technologies gives us, we put in the inverted commas, made in Europe. This is a local benefit for communities in Europe because those factories are based in countries and localities around Europe. MEPs found that very interesting and were very supportive of the idea because indeed many of these companies are quite small but have the opportunity to deliver global leadership in technologies that we will need to be more sustainable. And so in doing this vision, we also uncovered a gem, if you like. I know we have the responsible jury council, so I'm sorry to use the moniker a gem, but indeed it is a gem because by embracing this change, we also offer the opportunity for good jobs, sustainable jobs, unionized jobs that are clean jobs for the future, for the local communities, and really can help buy in support for for the energy transition that we need to have, as well as buying in support from my members to achieve these objectives. So there's a final point that I'll make today to say that it was good to work with the stakeholders. It's important to also involve the unions. If you're in a sector like ours, you must work together with the unions, I believe, and find the right pathways to get to a vision, and then understand how and what the policy frameworks you need to achieve it, and who will support you on that journey. Thank you, Stefan. I've probably overrun, for which I apologise in advance, but I hope you found that useful.
It was very useful indeed, and I'm still going to ask you a question, if you allow me, James, because the point you make on your stakeholder roundtables, I remember that we did, I will not name the sector, but for an industry federation, we said, you should do stakeholder engagement, and we can organize that for this specific project. And then they were very worried about it. How did your board react when you knocked at their door and said, I think now we should talk before we finalize what we are going to do? We need to talk to stakeholders. How was the reaction? Did they say, yes, let's invite them? Or how did that come about?
Well, it's a fair question, Stefan. Nobody can pretend in any association that you always get 100% positive responses to your ideas. Of course, there are some people who saw the value of that straight away and understood that in doing so, we were likely to gain more traction with people for the views that we were developing. Of course, there are others who are afraid because they know, and they're quite right, they know that we will be challenged, we will be face the accusations of things that we know may well be true. Nevertheless, the kind of dialogue that you need to have through those stakeholder roundtables is also to explain with the people who want to challenge you, who doubt your motivations, about the sincerity of what you're trying to achieve. And actually, that kind of dialogue we found to be very, how should we say, it was actually very rewarding. There were moments when it was a bit touch and go, and I can't say that it's always easy. But in the end, we found that people were open and willing to hear points of view. And I think that some of those stakeholders have also taken away a different opinion of the association of the sector than they had before, because they weren't quite expecting us to be as willing to embrace change as perhaps we've shown that we were. Perhaps others would have liked us to go even further than we have. Of course, you can't satisfy everyone, but I believe that we've come to a good balanced position. As I said in my speech, we've come to a good balanced position, which I think satisfies the majority of the members and quite a lot of the stakeholders as well.
Thank you very much for that. I think we will come back on that point as well, because I heard it in your colleagues as well, talking about the stakeholder engagement and the link. Iris called it trust, you called it sincerity. I think it's an important tool and an important approach to be embedded. But before we do that, I would like to give the floor to Alexander Deuring. Alexander Deuring is Secretary General of the European Compound Feed Manufacturers Federation. Alexander, I must admit I had to look it up a little bit. And of course, after then, when we talked together, I understood better, but you might want to explain a little bit what the association is about. But I think, from what I know, you are also at the center of the Green Deal debate. So I will give the floor to you to talk about the Feed Sustainability Charter 2030 that you made. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I hope you hear me well. And it's a great pleasure to come in right after James, because I think I just found out we have a reason to talk closer with our colleagues from Eurogas. We are feeding the customers that emit a lot of methane, and the methane strategy was just published last week. And I think there's a good argument for the point James must made, that we can all benefit from cross-sectoral cooperation and involvement. I think there is a common learning curve, as we heard also from previous speakers. So let me just take a quickly through the history of our association, our industry. We are even much older than Eurogas. We had our 60th anniversary last year, created in '59, as we came along with the first wave of trade associations after the first common agricultural policy was implemented. And again, another historic vote took place just a week ago with the latest version of that CAP as far as the council position is concerned. I think what is important is to state here, it's a very fragmented industry. If you look to industry leadership, our top 10 companies would probably not hold more than a 30% market share. So again, an industry highly fragmented, lots of SMEs, hundreds of family companies, very few listed companies, very few household names, even among the top 10 players, most of which are actually farmers-owned cooperatives. And I think that's, again, an issue of the leadership challenge when we talk about transformative change in the industry. Again, not to delve too much into numbers. I'm an agroeconomist, so I love numbers, but I will retain myself here. It's just to say we're a little bit the part of the iceberg below the ocean as far as the food chain is concerned. It is a high volume industry. Our members alone produce 165 million tons, but it itself is only 20% of what our farm animals consume. So if you put that all together, you come to a staggering volume of 800 million tons of feed consumed every year by our livestock population. And that's just Europe. And now that it's then also how did we embrace the sustainability journey? I think most of my professional career, now working more than 26 years for the Federation, has been playing the fireman. Feed safety issues, some of the older colleagues may remember BSE dioxins. So basically, I only ever get a call when the barn was burning. And at some point, that kind of, I mentioned that to the board, said we've got to change this, because then you're in a completely defensive mode of action. And luckily, with the previous commission, again, leadership change, very important to us. I would say sustainability is a godsend for trade associations like ours, because it helped us to switch from a completely defensive mode of action to a proactive action, and by developing our common visions and now our charter. So if you can move to the next slide, I would show you how we try to do this in our industry. So yeah, the one before just shows you 4 years ago, we actually, through leadership commitments, we moved to a bold vision statement, and putting animal nutrition right center stage. In the past years, we only ever talked about feed safety, probably only ever time you heard about our industry when there was another problem coming along. And well, when we really look to the core part of our business, it's truly based on animal nutrition sciences, one of those forgotten sciences which people hardly ever hear about. My wife, she's a human nutritionist, so we talk a lot together, because she always says animal nutrition knows so much more about animals than we do about humans. And as we now talk about farm to fork and putting sustainable food systems on the front line here, it's very simple to state that you can't have sustainable food without sustainable nutrition, and that means all along, from plants to animals to humans. And we're trying to bring these together because they are not connected today, not even on the science side. So now, as our former chancellor would say, if you have a vision, you need to go see a doctor. Now, that's easy to build a vision, you might say, for any associations. It's good to fill a page with nice statements and so on, but actually it only ever works when you can turn it into, let's say, tangible sectoral action. As people said before very clearly, it's got to be measurable action so that other people can follow you and can challenge you, rightly or wrongly, or whether you're looking at the right targets as far as the sector is concerned. And that's what we did just last month. We turned the vision into a charter document setting out key sectoral ambitions. We identified 5 of them. And of course, we linked them both to the SDGs as well as to the Green Deal targets. Now, obviously, as we're in the EU setting, we have to integrate both. And as we will show you in some example, I think in many cases, they actually work well together. But as other sectors suggested, I think it's very important that we avoid Eurocentric solutions, because most of us, and I think it's true for most industrial sectors, operate in a global market. And that's very true. So for our sector, as we are highly dependent on imports as far as key raw materials are concerned, in our case, protein-rich feed materials. So we set out these, what we call tangible ambitions, and putting some concrete actions behind this, deliverables, something that is meaningful for our members, for our customers, and indeed for society as a whole. It's a learning process for us to look beyond our customers. We are really 100% B2B. The final consumer will never ever see our products on the supermarket shelf unless you buy pet food, but we are not representing the pet food industry. We are only representing industry that is producing feed for food producing animals. So there is no direct contact with the consumer. So we had to look beyond the consumer, the customer, the farmer, and the consumer to understand and translate societal goals into something meaningful for our sector, as we are so far in advance of the final consumer product of animal origin. So how did we go about that? So the next slide will show you what we did actually in practical terms. Something our colleague from the Jury Council already mentioned. Code of practices, guidelines are absolutely crucial to make it tangible for your members and for your partners up the chain and down the chain. So we produced, let's say, a guidance document on how to measure environmental impacts using the European methodology on product environmental footprint. That's the first document you see to the left. We were among the 10 food pilots that went through the whole process of vetting and presenting their sectoral guidance document, and we got through with flying colors 2 years ago as the first food-related category rules that based on the PACT methodology that was approved by member states. Now that's a professional guide for LCA experts. I would challenge anybody sitting in this room to really understand it, unless you're a trained LCA expert. But it is meaningful because it is crucial for the element we heard before, that unless you can't measure, you will not be able to demonstrate progress on some of the key deliverables. The next important tool we developed 5 years ago was a guidelines on how to source some of the key products, as I mentioned before, for a business that's responsible soy. Again, a very important vote took place this week on deforestation, on the protection of world forests in the European Parliament. There's a huge societal expectations on cleaning the supply chain as far as deforestation risk commodities are concerned, and soy is definitely on the front line here. So that's something that we have put together with the help of ITC in Geneva. They're carrying out benchmarks of existing soy production schemes in third countries, but also in Europe, because soy is produced in Europe, not enough of it, but it is produced in places like Italy, France, and near the Black Sea, of course, Romania, and so on. And last but not least, I think an essential one, I picked this up from an earlier question this afternoon. We consider ourselves as the resource efficiency champions of the food chain, because we do give value to co-products, side streams from food production and the biofuel sector in particular. We are at a rate of 40% of the raw materials used are side streams from the food industry and the biofuel sector. Therefore meaning in our calculation, we are preventing for more than 65 million tons of such co-products to go to waste by keeping them in the food sector and giving a value to that. I have worked for the food sector before, and it's one of these well-known or maybe unknown secrets. There is no food production system without co-products. So it is animal feeding that gives not only sustainability, but value to food production systems. And the same is true for biofuels, if you think about biodiesel and bioethanol. So it's about putting things into a toolbox that means something for your members, can be put in practice, as we heard from our colleague from the Jury Council. So then I will move to the hard questions that Stefan put so ably in front of us. How do you get there? What were the challenges? What is the leadership element in here? And something that I learned early on in this process to position and to see in which way a trade association like us can create added value for members is to follow the Tour de France principle. So I have to say, my vice president was an Englishman, but he loved the Tour de France. He's a cycler himself, and said, look, Alex, what you have to go for is not the front runners. The front runners, well, let's not talk about them. There will always be front runners. And don't look after the laggards either. Somebody will pick them up. You have to stay with the peloton. You have to, if you want to create impacts, you have to define, you have to stay as trade association with the peloton. So you have to run fast. There's no doubt about it. You can't play the lowest denomination game, as some people always challenge us, sort of trade associations playing it softly, playing it downwards. That's not the case. We follow the peloton principle, and it has served us well. And so, but then, of course, unlike the Jury Council stated, we are not a trade, we are not a standard-making body itself. So because we are mainly an advocacy organization, there are other standard-making bodies, and what we want to do is, again, I heard this before here, not reinventing the wheel, but giving credit, visibility, transparency, what's already out there in the marketplace, and often not very easily accessible to members or downstream partners. In the case of responsible soy, we were surprised ourselves with the new benchmarking tool that we have now in the meantime signed on 20 different responsible soy sourcing schemes. So quite a staggering uptake from suppliers. What are the key challenges here? Now let's go directly to that. Yes, as we are so fragmented, priority setting is vastly different between member states, and we have to find a balance there and recognize the different starting points, because we will not make any impact unless we recognize the reality on the ground in the different countries. And therefore, we look for a way. Our charter is a reference body which are and have to be picked up by our national associations, so they translate it into their reality on the ground. And that is basically the nudging element here, that we make it relevant to each of our members and they turn it into a tool, hopefully into a tool, into a guidelines that make sense for them in response to challenges which they confront in their national marketplace. Now, on the leadership element, I want to just maybe finish here with one word. Luckily, we do have the leadership at the board level to take us further. We work also with declarations signed by top companies, hopefully creating peer pressure effect. And the best example is, again, soy sourcing guidelines, where such a commitment came through our top 10 companies and is now signed up by 250 of our members companies. So there is a role for everybody here. And there remains a role for frontrunners, of course. The first question we got 15 years ago when we received our first mandate on sustainability is, well, as simple as that. Is it competitive or is it pre-competitive? The answer at the time was, yes, it is competitive, but there is place and the need for a trade association to step in to define and work on elements which can be clearly defined as pre-competitive, because not a single player in the market would be able to do something on this on its own. So I will stop here. That's the part of the experience that I'd like to share with the speakers and the delegates this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and especially because you provided a top sentence that we could use later on. I think when we talk about the Pact for Sustainable Industry, you said sustainability is a godsend for industry federations because it allows us to move from defensive to proactive. I think that's a very strong sentence that you made there. I'm piling up different interesting topics to discuss, and you added to that the role of the leadership at the top or the peloton. So I would like to come back to that later, but first maybe give the floor to the two last speakers. And first, it's my pleasure to announce Martina Bianchini. We know each other from a long time ago, also still in CSR Europe, and I was at Toyota. And we were together in the board, but now you are leading the International Fragrance Association, and together with the International Organization of the Flavor Industry, you made a sustainability charter, and we would like to know a little bit more about the ins and outs of that, Martina. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stefan. It's really great to be back at CSR Europe, and it's also great to see how the association has evolved over the years, and to be on your platform today, it's really a pleasure and a privilege. So on the first slide, you see I will be speaking about the IFRA IOFI Sustainability Charter. This is something you can actually follow on our website. And the sectors that we represent here is the smell and taste industry. So we're the B2B suppliers of flavors and fragrances. And I will be speaking about the IFRA part today, just the fragrance part. So we exist since 1973, and we're also a hybrid association. We are setting the IFRA standards, which sets the maximum dose of fragrance in finished consumer goods products. So we have a code of practice since 1973, and we've been working on that, and we are charged with administering this. And the IFRA standards are valid for consumer applications in cosmetic, home care, personal care, and industrial applications, as well as fine fragrance. So as a B2B supplier industry, we were asked in 2016 by our membership, and our membership are large multinational companies, as well as 21 national associations in 4 regions of the world, we were asked to make a proposal for a sustainability charter. So we are global organizations, and coming up with an industry-wide charter that is universal for the whole sector was the challenge that we were given. So we had 4 principles from which we worked on, and they have already been mentioned by several of the other speakers. For us, the first was we should be aspirational but also achievable. And we should develop a charter that would be voluntary and inclusive. And we heard a lot from Iris about the need to be inclusive. And for us, it would mean that we would need to develop something that would be good for all companies, large and small, because our industry also has a big mix of hundreds of SMEs and a few leading multinational corporations. So, and when we say voluntary, it means what are we prepared to do on a voluntary basis at industry level, irrespective of the external factors like COVID, what we still want to do together as a fragrance and flavor value chain. We also have a principle that it needs to be antitrust compliant. We just talked about that, where is competitive and where is it pre-competitive. So anytime you go to a trade association, you need to pay attention to these things and identify where are the boundaries for where you can work as an association, but then also raise the bar for everybody. And then this initiative should be complementary to what the large companies are already doing that have sustainability programs in place for many years, but it should also be complementary to the regulatory sustainability requirements that are already in place. And there is a lot of sustainability legislation, may not always be called that way, but for us in our industry, the Nagoya Protocol and anything related to biodiversity, national biodiversity initiatives, chemical strategies for sustainability, they're all regulatory sustainability legislations, and compliance is not optional, but you want to do something that is in addition to complying with regulation. On the next slide, you look at why did we do it? We had a framework for progress, and the framework is very simple to what others have already said. The first thing you want to do is you want to have a charter for your industry that defines what does it mean, what does sustainability mean in your own industry, for us in the flavor and fragrance industry. So you have to define that for you. And it starts with raising awareness first amongst yourself in your own value chain, upstream to your own suppliers, but also downstream towards your customers. Also raising awareness with policymakers and with stakeholders, building this trust, that we talked about. And then we need to provide the businesses, and those are particularly the small and medium-sized companies, with a toolbox. Because a lot of big companies, they know what to do. They're members of Global Compact and so many leading programs. But the SMEs, they want to do something, but very often they don't really know how to get started. So therefore, we felt it was important to provide a toolbox to the SMEs so we could be truly inclusive. And then also was already talked about, we need to report on progress. And for that, you need data. And the data comes from your industry and is aggregated by the trade association so that you can also use it to report at your industry or your sector level. So aggregating the data at industry level, that no company can do alone, that has to be done by the trade association or another body, which a coalition. So, and a lot of it was said already as well, stakeholder trust is absolute critical. So we did both in this process, internal reality checks and external reality checks, because if you are off with the meeting or too far away from meeting the expectations of your stakeholders, you don't build the trust with your programs or your charter. So, and lastly, the charter for us was set up to identify opportunities for collaboration with others. So this is why we did it. To Stefan's question on how did you do it, and this is the next slide, shows the charter and shows 5 focus areas and commitments. I would say the process we used in the flavor and fragrance industry was not that different than the process used by others. But here you see really 5 concentric circles. And when you look at what we were set out to do since 1973, we worked on product safety and on product stewardship through our code of practice in both industries. But then in the 90s, we had the environmental sustainability work. And here the second circle on environmental footprint really shows what was traditionally environmental sustainability. And then the third circle is about well-being of employees, but it's all the CSR, the elements that fall in the traditional CSR area. And that came a little bit after the environmental sustainability dimension. But what is new in this is really extending your remit through your whole value chain, both upstream as a B2B supplier industry to your own suppliers. And that's what we're doing through responsible sourcing, looking both at synthetics and naturals, but more on natural materials because we source a lot from nature, roses, jasmine, iris, patchouli, oranges, citrus, spices, cloves, vanilla, etc. And some of them comes from exotic places. So this means you have to have more emphasis on responsible sourcing, which also means you need to work more with your own suppliers, and they go down all the way to the farm level in our industry as well. And then you need to go from your product safety all the way downstream, to your customers and see what programs they already have in place, but also how you can collaborate with them for more transparency and for more partnerships. So, the newness in this is that it's a charter and a program that covers the whole fragrance and flavor value chain. And what were the challenges in doing this? The challenges were pretty much the same as others have experienced as well. Anytime you're on a trade association environment, you need to first build the internal alignment with your own members. And if your members are global in different geography, large and small, there is never one size fits all. You have to annotate it to your particular situation. Second challenge is the external reality checks. I already mentioned it, that whatever you come up with, you need to go and see if you missed something key. When we did the first reality checks, we were told you need to pay more attention to biodiversity because you're sourcing quite a lot of your materials from the natural world, and therefore ecosystems and ecosystem services are important to us. So we took that into account. And so the future then, looking at what are the drivers for change and the future of implementing such roadmaps. For us, the charter is new. We launched it only this year in July in a virtual event like the one we're having today. Initially, we thought about 50 companies signing up, but we have now 120 companies all around the world that signed up to the charter. And for us now, the biggest challenge and the next step is to work on the implementation and to take the toolbox that we have developed and really in a step-by-step mode, together with the signatory companies, look at different ways to provide guidance, a framework, and assistance to help them, particularly the SME, to build their own sustainable business platforms or enhance their sustainability business case, and then collectively, by gathering the data, having all the information and the data available for our first sustainability report, which is going to come up in the first quarter or the first 5 months of 2021. So it is a great journey so far, and also looking into collaborative action with others. We know we cannot do it alone as B2B supplier. We're in the middle of our value chain, and without partnership, upstream and downstream, we are not able to deliver progress. So we partnered already with the GIZ in Germany on a project on developing a best practice in South Africa, as well as with the Union of Ethical Biotrade. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Martina. That was very inspiring and very clear. Looking at the time, I will go to the last speaker. She had to wait a long time, but they are already working since a long time as well on the topic. Anne Dirks from Cefic, from the European Chemical Industry Council. And Anne, you will show us a slide that says in '85 you made the responsible care approach, but since then a lot evolved, a lot in the chemical sector. Can you share that with us in a few minutes? Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Absolutely delighted to share our journey, our sustainability journey with you and then with the audience. So thank you, CSR Europe, for giving us the opportunity for sharing, and also congratulations on what you do with the European Pact for Sustainability. I think not a full audience can see that, but we can also chat between ourselves here. And I think we do agree already that this was a highly interesting exchange between the associations and something we would like to continue and share experiences. So thanks for setting that up to CSR Europe here. So before I dive into the journey, I would just like to introduce Cefic. So Cefic is the voice of the chemical industry in Europe. So indeed, we have already been based in Brussels since the 70s, 72. We represent 20,000 large, medium, and small chemical companies in Europe. Our business, most of what we do is interact on an everyday basis on behalf of our membership with international and European institutions, NGOs, international media. And of course, we also have a membership of the ICCA, which is the world organization representing the chemical industry. But let us move now to the journey. So to the next slide. Thank you. So yes, indeed, Stefan already mentioned that. So already in 1985, that's the chemical industry, initiated the Responsible Care Program. And that gave us a really strong foundation to build a sustainability program upon. So the Responsible Care had originally, I should say, a focus very much on the operational issues, on health, safety, and environmental issues. But then in 2012, actually, it was, of course, a year before, there was a wish by a very high, the highest governance body within Cefic, that's the board level, a wish to say we need to go out there, we need to be talking on sustainable development. And after a year of intensive meetings in 2012, indeed, we came out with a vision. And that vision talked about what is the role of the chemical industry in a sustainable world of tomorrow. And we underlined already from that moment on very much that we had a solution providing function. Indeed, our products are basically chemistry. You find them basically everywhere. So we have a high responsibility to make sure that they contribute to the well-being of the people and the planet. 2012, we were very excited. We had our first sustainability report out there. We had already indicators, and we said we want to show to the world we walk the talk. And then we started off by making calls for projects, and you can see actions left, right, etc. But we felt that was not enough. So we said, no, this gives a bit a feeling of entropy. So our board then said we need really to make sure that we really make progress, we drive progress, we show progress. And a special entity was then set up, also a very high body within Cefic circles. It was called the Program Council at that time, specifically to drive sustainability forward. And we started, and one of the first things we did was defining the Cefic materiality matrix. We went to our membership, had questions left and right. And so on the same time, we already started to work on a framework, because we felt, as I mentioned, there was a bit, the actions were a bit going everywhere. And we really felt the need to have a framework under which we could all align the direction and the actions. And that was then the Cefic Sustainability Charter. In that charter, we defined the role of the chemical industry, and we also talked about the role of Cefic, and we're going deeper in details in a while. And we also had a third pillar, and that was a very important pillar, which was called a roadmap to sustainable development. And of course, 2016, you already had the SDGs, but while we had it approved at a board, because that's how we brought it forward, the SDGs were not there yet, which was maybe not the smartest thing to do. We could have waited maybe half a year, but anyhow. So the roadmap, in fact, what is it? What is it? In that roadmap, in that third pillar of the Sustainability Charter, we identified 4 key areas based on the efforts we've done in the materiality mapping, 4 key areas where we wanted to drive progress. And so those 4 areas were a low carbon economy, resource efficiency, circular economy, and then a 4th pillar, which we call care for people and planet, where you find issues like biodiversity, but also, of course, issues around product safety. So that was it. We had a roadmap. So we wanted then to move on to a sectorial roadmap, and that we've done together with the World Business Council. We're still on the previous slide. So in 2008, we had an SDG roadmap, identifying really actions that we were going to take collectively as a sector associations, but also for individual companies. And we went on implementing those. And last year we focused, and then we can move to the next slide. Last year we focused indeed on the elaboration of sustainable development indicators. So like I said, after the publication of the vision, we already had key performance indicators. We still have them. Those are the facts and figures of Cefic. You can consult them on our web. But what we felt we should be doing is we should try and identify indicators that really matters and that really drive progress towards the Green Deal. And that's how we actually combine the sustainability work, which you see on the left side. So the first column indicates the 4 focus areas of the Charter. The second column indicates the work we've done on the SDG roadmap. And then indeed, we see the indicators as the link between the work we do in the sustainability area and how we then can contribute to the Green Deal ambitions. It's not a comprehensive slide, it gives priorities, but this is then important, we feel, to make that link, because we are, after all, an association which main tasks is advocating and looking into the policies. And we feel it's important to connect this and to show how we can demonstrate, how we can actually contribute to meeting the goals, the objectives of the Green Deal. You can now move to the next slide, sorry. I'm not going to dwell too much in the history, but also Stefan said indeed, like, can you share some key lessons learned? And of course, I'd be happy to do so. So the first key lesson, I think, is that leadership is important. As I mentioned, the initiative is really coming out of our board. By now we have, and that's a bit the governance issue combined with the leadership, we have by now 30 members in a sustainability forum. We have like 15 members as a broader, I would say a broader committee. And we really try to have in that group CSOs, so Chief Sustainability Officers, or people very close to the decision center. The chair of the group is really a chair which has a seat in our ExCom, in our board, and we are looking there for really, I would say, the front runners. But I learned something very interesting. That was the pace of the peloton, yes. But the chair is a front runner, so that's for now we have a co-CEO of DSM leading that group. I think also what is important, apart from this very strong commitment, is how do you in fact get the whole organization, the whole association moving on sustainability, right? Because I always say, like, I hope that by the time I retire, we don't have to be there anymore, and sustainability is something that is so automatically taken up by each and everyone. So how do we work towards this mainstreaming of sustainability? So we have a role which is an advisory role. So we, the Sustainability Forum, that is, we kind of give advice on every policy position that leaves Cefic. I'm not saying we do it for every policy position with the same intensity, we prioritize, but what we try to do is to focus on some major blocks where we in fact see, is this aligned with what we have in our charter, or is this aligned with what companies used to have in their sustainability strategy? So we have this advisory role. There is similarly an advisory role for an advocacy forum and a legal forum. Apart from that role, we have also a trend monitoring role. That's also foreseen in our operating rules. So that means that we're watching the trends and we translate them. We sometimes make white papers, for instance. So we translate that into white papers that we start sharing then again with the policy centers. So the policy centers, what we strive for there is to have a dialogue. This is rather new, so that practice is installed 2 years ago, and I can share with you, if interested, further experiences on that one. The third key lesson learned was that it helps when the organization starts to work around a vision. So the picture you see there, molecule managers, that's an exercise we've done last year. And that gives a vision of how will the world look in the mid-century, what is the role of the chemical industry, how can we contribute, what does it mean for us? And it was really this exercise that led to a shared long-term vision where we could then more easily place our contributions in, and that gave us really some direction and long-term sustainable focus. A fourth key learning was when are you successful? I mean, yes, you can measure your indicators, and yes, you can try to measure the impact. But when would we judge our program to be successful? I think that's when you can see that you provoke change. So I think that's a very important component. It's the change management. So sometimes you find yourself on an uncharted territory, but we try to, with the Sustainability Forum, we really try to have this long-term compass. And there we're very much, I would say, supported by Cefic General Management. And we also installed a Cefic sustainability internal grouping where we exchange on issues, where we bring openly discussions on the table. The fifth bullet I wanted to dwell on was concrete projects. Is it a success or not? And I think this has been always the most difficult step, because what is it that you really try to do, to achieve? Because it was nice to have a vision, it was even nicer, and we were very happy to have a charter and an SDG roadmap. But how now to bring that into practice? Typically, I'm an engineer from background, so I would love to do something all together with the members, trying to, I don't know what, invent a new molecule to solve an issue. But that's in fact, as an association, which is the hardest part to do. I think a lot of these activities, these innovations happen at the side of the companies itself, because you find yourself in a context, in a societal context that is changing. So I see the role of an association more that we are a convener to capture those changes and to try to facilitate the exchanges then between our members, and to be a kind of catalyst. So I think that is where we defined what is our role. Is it to launch specific projects? We have defined a role more like convener, facilitator, encouragement of collaborations, also calling to the Commission to have the enabling conditions in place such that the ideas that live with our members can be realized. And then finally, and I don't know if that's on screen because for the time being I don't see the screen, but the final point of the success factor I wanted to state here is about partnerships. I think we really cannot do this alone. We have partnered up with many. That is also, as I mentioned, because defining a project on your own, if you're an upstream industry, is very hard. So we have partnerships in technology, we have partnerships with the World Business Council, Together for Sustainability, another one I'm proud of. Wind Europe, you see, as Cefic, we have a platform. And now I feel we have another one here on the block, and that's the collaboration that CSR Europe is leading for us, and that's the European Pact for Sustainability. So thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm now under pressure of time, and I have had the task to try to summarize some main elements in the different speeches. And I think I came up with four ways to do, but also challenges. Is how do you start, or how do you run sustainability inside an industry federation? And you mentioned it's a matter of leadership, but it's also a matter of keeping the peloton, and that image of the peloton. But all of you mentioned strongly it's a way to engage the SMEs. And I think with the European economy that is based on small and medium enterprises, the role of industry federations in equipping the small and medium enterprises in working together or linking up the small and medium enterprises seems to be a very important element in all the work that you are doing. Related to that in the same point still is, of course, how do you do the internal alignment, the decision making? And we heard different models there. And you were just mentioning how we have a kind of committee that is an advisory role towards the entire organization. Some others mentioned other ways of the engagement of the board, sometimes with majority voting or not, but that investment in the internal alignment seems to be not always easy, but yeah, worthwhile to pay attention to it. A second element I picked up is, and it was related to what was said almost immediately from the beginning about the trust. It's about having the data, the reporting, the transparency. And what I picked up during the session now, that leads then to clarifying further the vision, making that vision in a real strategy, translating that in a roadmap with clear indicators, etc. So investing as an industry federation in sustainability, data and transparency seem to be key importance. A third element is the stakeholder engagement. It came with all of you, and it's interesting to hear. Some said, it's good to check, are we on the right direction, and to get feedback on a regular basis. But you also said it's good to bring in some of the expertise that is out there. But also it's good, one of you said, to have the internal buy-in. Look what they say we should be doing. So it's a kind of internal argument in a certain way. And it's not always easy to bring up that stakeholder engagement in a systematic way, but I think from the initiatives that you outlined, they are important. And the last, but maybe the most challenging, I think, but on that I would like to have your comments, is the practical work, the implementation, the measurable action. Also there I picked up, certainly towards the SMEs, certainly towards the supply chain, sometimes also on specific topics, like on health and safety or on other operational topics, etc. But what is the action element? And you said in the end, we are more a convener than an action-oriented, while some initiatives, especially on the supply chain, I hear Martina saying, we are doing a project with GIZ on a specific topic in order for us to learn. So my question to all of you, and then I'm also going to look at some questions that came, and I know we are a little bit over time, but that action-oriented work, is that something that is the next barrier or the next frontier to do and to make impact at scale, or is that easy? I don't know. I ask it to each of you, so please, you can unmute yourself, my panelists, so please do, but how strong can that become? You can also raise your hand, apparently. And in the meantime, I will look at the questions in the chat.
Mhm. I raise my hand, but maybe I can give an answer, Stefan. Is that okay? Yeah. I think it very much depends also on how you're organized as an association, right? So we are very broad and we have many different, I would call them product sector groups underneath. So some of our product sector groups, those that are really very homogeneous and have specific issues, they can launch actions. So there you can see indeed also that goes into guidances for safe use or safe handling of solvents. So I really depend on. It really depends in my feeling on how broad your scope is of who you represent. So we represent, of course, a broader community. So then it becomes more difficult to have the actions over that. But as I mentioned, I mean, we do partner. I couldn't dwell on that, but we have, for instance, strong partnerships with the World Business Council. So they also draft guidances of how does a sustainable portfolio needs to look like. What we then do is really we multiply that message and we organize. So I think it's a mixed bag of answers. I would say it's yeah.
Thank you, Martina, because I was triggered by your GIZ example, and you are fairly at the start of that roadmap. What is your image of practical action that you can do with the sector association? Could you give your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we thought about it a lot, and just as example, this project with the GIZ is we have an MOU between IFRA, IOFI, the South African National Member Association that's member of us, and the GIZ. And it's how does something like that come about is for us, we have clearly in the association a policy driver. Yeah, for any partnership we develop, we can't be the business driver because we're in the pre or post competitive stage. So for us, the interest in entering a project like that is to help develop a best practice for Nagoya Protocol implementation, biodiversity compliance and implementation. But there's other, for the GIZ, they have a broader goal on sustainability and implementation in their Bio Innovation Africa program. So, and but you need these best practices, because then if you develop one, then you can laterally maybe transfer it, to some other country or, to some other crop. This one is on buhu, but then, which is a shrub in South Africa, mint-like product. But then you can transfer it to other supply chains, if you will, or other countries to foster implementation.
Thank you. Sandro, you wanted to say something about this topic of action.
Yeah, I would like to complement what the two colleagues said, because I think that one dimension is also the fact of the credibility of the whole exercise. If there is no action, if the external stakeholders after some time see that there's nothing moving, of course, the risk is that they lose interest. So doing action is also a way of keeping the exercise alive, and to maybe you try one way and it doesn't work out, and so you need to adjust the direction. But the important thing is to keep it moving, because as we said before, the context is moving, even the membership is moving, it's changing. Sometimes there are mergers and acquisitions, or there are new entries, or there are companies that leave the business. So it's important to keep the exercise alive. If we knew already from the start what are the recipes for 100% success, of course we would not be here discussing. So that's also one part of the exercise.
Sorry, Alexander, you raised your hand on that one?
Yeah, just also again, to give a concrete example, I think the two both go very well together. Project management, action-oriented task for an association like ours, or as we heard from colleagues, and indeed the facilitator convener role. It's such a dynamic process. Sustainability, that's the wonderful thing about it, because it's a moving target all the time. It never stands still. And I think that's what we have to learn also as trade association, to anticipate demands both by members, policymakers, and market players. And it's the challenge because they are not necessarily aligned. If you look at Green Deal targets, the way to get their targets is easy, but how to get there, there's often a great deal of difference between the way the market wants to see you act as a responsible supplier and what the policymakers want. So there's a tension here, and we try to bridge that and see that with our toolbox we can sort of satisfy both drivers in the car. Never easy, eh? If you have two masters, you know what I've talked about. The problem is, what I want to give as a concrete examples, Catalyst, Anne mentioned it. We developed with our partners overseas a global feed LCA database, because we are buying the same raw materials all over, whether in Europe or US or South America or China. Everybody buys the same raw materials to produce feeds, whether that's soy, corn, or other grains. So you have an engine called the PACT methodology, and luckily we had a good foresight here. We developed the underlying methodology more like 6 years ago with FAO. So the EU methodology is completely aligned with the global environmental assessment methodology, in our case, as far as feed and food is concerned. So we have a global alignment there, very important, not to come up with Eurocentric solutions only. And then you cannot have a methodology as an engine without the data, which is the fuel. And I think, Stefan, you mentioned that. I think colleagues mentioned that we have probably the greatest value added proposition for members, as we are in an almost single selling position here, because we are pre-competitive to get the mandate and then look for ways to aggregate the data, make them anonymous, make them usable in a form that others can check on this. So I think that's what I believe in what I said before, that sustainability is really a great opportunity for trade associations. So we have set up this global LCA database as an independent non-profit organization under US law, just to say we cannot do everything by our own means, but if the market demand is there, it will fly by itself. We can create startups. We don't have to do, and we can't do everything ourselves, because we remain mainly a lobbying advocacy organizations, usually small budgets. Everybody would agree, probably too low budgets. But anyway, in this case, we can, let's say, create the groundwork for allowing then startups to jump in, fill gaps, and often that has to do with data aggregation, like in our case, the LCA data collection that we have. We are very proud of it. I think we're the only food sector having this at the global level right now.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm afraid I will have to conclude this session. I gave already more or less my conclusion, but it's too rich for 90 minutes, of course. That was also to be expected. And I would like to thank first all the panelists for making it that rich. We are at the start. This Pact for Sustainability, for Sustainable Industry is indeed, the purpose is to drive this type of discussion and to drive also the collaboration based on this type of discussion, especially with the European Commission. And again, it's a pity that Mr. Kosigu could in the end not be with us, but when all this policy making is happening, also we had a question from Jan there about the taxonomy and what that means for the industry federations. So I think as CSR Europe, in any case, we will commit to bring at more regular pace together the industry federations, not only companies, to see what do we share, what can we learn from each other, and where can we advance together. I would like also to thank the more than 100 attendants to this European SDG Roundtable. And tomorrow is another day of the European SDG Summit with a rich program. But thank you all, Anne, Sandro, James, Iris, Martina, and Alexander, and Marco, and my team here for organizing this session. And I wish you further a pleasant afternoon. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you, Stefan. Bye-bye.
Thanks for inviting. Bye.